So my question would be, you're referring to the developer, which I
Yep.
understand is the SME.
No, the
And
SME
No,
is the separate person. The developer made this. I wrote the words as the SME.
okay, and then the ID is the person that designed the slides and all that.
Yeah, that made what you see on the screen right now.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote the words, they put it all together in this format and made the clickable pieces.
So is the ID different from the developer, or is the ID
Same
developer?
thing.
In this
Okay.
environment,
In this
it was the
case.
same,
Yeah,
Okay.
in this case, it's the same.
but they could be different.
Okay.
Okay. What could you, Barry, give me a little bit of explanation on how are they different? Where is the focus of the development and where, well, I know that the instructional design, I guess, is more into the form.
Okay.
Oh.
So as an instructional, so let's assume you have a team of 3. Okay. You have an instructional designer, you have a developer, and you have a subject matter expert, 3 people.
Mhm.
The request for a course or a training solution comes to the instructional designer. That instructional designer defines what the solution needs to be. They design what that solution is going to kind of look like. If it's a course, they're going to figure out the structure of the course. They're going to figure out the objectives of the course. They're going to figure out kind of the scripting of the course, the idea, some of the navigation. They're going to design that solution.
Okay.
The SME, they're probably going to interview the SME, or they're going to do like they did with Jennifer, and they're going to hand her a script and say, "Please fill this out."
Okay.
But they're going to manage that communication.
And I will say they brought us in and they gave us a training, and they realized halfway through the first of the 3 days that we didn't need half the training because we're trained educators and we already know how to do objectives, learning objectives. But for the other contents, they don't always know. But they brought us in, talked to us about learning objectives, talked to us about all their expectations and what they would be doing with our information, and then walked us through all the templates. From there, we were sent away to create the content.
Right. I know when I worked with my SMEs, I said, I don't care if you know how to build the thing. What I want to know is I want the idea that's in your head. If you can think of a better, like in class, if you would do this in a certain way, I want to know how you would do it in class live. Let me and my team worry about how to recreate that, but we need that idea. So then the instructional designer at that point has the course, the script, all that information. The script has been approved. At that point, the developer is essentially an order taker. They're not part of that design process. They might have sat in on some meetings or something so that they know what's coming.
Yeah.
But basically, you hand them all those notes. You hand them the scripts. You hand them the outlines, all that stuff, and then they build, and then you review. As the instructional designer, you review it, and you guide that process. Then, when they hand you a final, because they probably are the ones recording the audio, or they're going to have somebody record the audio, then you might turn it back to the SME and say, okay, based on what you gave us, here's what we built. How did we do? And then the SME would give you the nod of yes or no. And if there's a no, then the edits would go back.
So the developer is really the one that put all that information into the management system, into the learning management system?
No. The ID is probably the one that manages the learning management system and getting the content in. Or there's a fourth person on the team that's an administrative staff. And that administrator is the one that manages that piece. The ID goes, hey, here you go. And then they put it in.
I am a little bit confused today.
Right? Yeah. Do I need to draw it out for you?
So I am trying to I guess separate the designing from the development is where I have a little bit of confusion, because I feel like they are blend. For myself, I thought
they blend a lot.
Mhm.
They
Okay.
can very much blend.
Okay. Okay. So,
So,
all right.
here.
I can.
All right. So can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
I
All right.
see.
So you got 4 people. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. They're very boring people. They're all square. But I'm bummed. All right. So now the text box. So this person is the ID. Okay.
Right.
This person is the SME. This person is the developer.
Mhm.
This person is the admin. So you have 4 people. You have your ID, your SME, and your developer. And actually, the SME is probably sitting outside the circle as well. So what happens is somebody requests the course content.
Right.
The ID takes that request.
Mm-hmm.
The ID designs the structure, designs the outline, decides the objectives, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They then give that to the SME. And the SME writes any necessary script, any whatever. Because,
The content, right?
sorry?
She gives the, I mean, the SME is the person that will give the content.
Yes.
For
And that relationship is what keeps the ID from having to be the expert.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So the ID basically plays dumb and like leans on the SME for all the content.
Mm-hmm.
So the SME then gives the ID the content. The ID then gives the developer all of that information. The developer does their job in Storyline, Rise, Captivate, whatever media they need to do, video, Word,
Okay, that's
job aids, whatever it is they're building. They then pass that back to the ID, probably for like a technical review, because in theory, the ID is not the expert, so they can't always tell, yes, it's absolutely correct, the content is right. They are trusting that the content the SME gave them is right. So they're testing to make sure things aren't broken in whatever it is that they're giving them. Chances are there's something broken. The pictures aren't right. The buttons don't work the way you expect. The table of contents isn't right, whatever. Back and forth. ID developer, ID developer. Once the ID gets a version that they go, yep, winner, it's good. It typically will go to the SME. The SME will provide a review. The SME will either send feedback to the ID and say, nope, this is not right, send it back to the developer, or the SME will say it's great, and it'll come back to the ID as great, passed. At that point, it's ready for the learning management system.
okay.
And it will go from the ID to the LMS admin, or if this person doesn't exist, the ID will put it in the learning management system.
Okay, I see.
And the developer will move on to the next one. And that's how the factory works. And we make instructional design widgets because the ID will be on another project and they'll be working with another SME and a developer. The developer is, that's why I say the developer is basically an order taker, right? They get an input from the ID, they provide an output. That's it. The thinker is the ID. Now, obviously, in some shops, these two are the same person. And in other shops, these 3 are the same person.
I've seen that in a lot of job recs, like the
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is a pretty stressful place to be. If you're on if you're a team of 1, that's a pretty stressful place to be because you do all of these jobs on a timeline. The worst place to be is when you have to be the SME also. If you have to be all 4 of these things, And I've seen that happen. That is not a fun place to be.
That's a teacher.
There you go. And that's why you're trying to be an ID.
That's a teacher. You do all of that.
Do that, right.
So does that help you, Maria?
Yes, yes, it clarified because I was always confused with the ID and the developer. I said, well, but the ID is the normally who is also thinking on the media. But
Now you might, if you're really lucky, really lucky, you'll have a fifth person out here, and this is your media person.
Okay, to make it a
Really
little
lucky.
bit complicated, right?
Because maybe this person is a graphic artist, maybe this person is a videographer, any of that kind of stuff, that might be really nice to have. You might, in our world, one of the things that I moved to have us do is I moved to have the SMEs create content. So I took this role right here and I stuck it over here. And I taught my SMEs to be media developers. And I said to them, instead of you creating PowerPoints and scripts and all that crap, just use PowerPoint and record what you know. And let's make little videos of it. And then I'll take those videos and we'll put them in the storyline files or in the Rise sites.
So you operate, in that case, you are the ID and the developer.
Kinda, yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a Rise site, I'm going to be the developer. There's no point in me handing my Rise site over to somebody else when it takes me a matter of hours to do it. The reason a developer would take on a storyline course is that takes a long time. Or if I've got a lot of projects. If I've got a lot of projects, I might throw a Rise site at a developer. But I normally would not. In my company, we do have a separate LMS admin, but I am responsible, and I'll show you this in a moment, for putting the content into the LMS. The LMS admin is the one who's responsible for packaging it and making it usable.